feel like she's with someone against her will, or maybe worse.
Stupid bitches.
Viewer discretion is advised for this educational documentary. Thank you so much to all of my patrons. If your name is on screen right now, then you're a legend. Our love and respect goes out to all those that knew and loved Savannah and all those affected by this dark case. Savannah Page Gold was a 21-year-old woman from Jacksonville, Florida. She had a heart of gold to match her name. She was a remarkable young woman who was known for her charm. She was kind and had a compassionate nature. She was born to Daniel and Sherry, joining brother Chris. Savannah had a special bond with her mother. They were not just mother and daughter, but also best friends. Sherry was sadly battling with cancer, so the doting daughter helped her to navigate the challenges of chemotherapy. This helped them to form a unique relationship built on love and support. Savannah truly was priceless to the family. She also worked hard at Bonefish Grill as a waitress. This was a job she had been in for around 2 years, and there she left a lasting impression on her co-workers and the customers that she served. All of this whilst making money to support the family. Her genuine and friendly personality made her a beloved figure in the restaurant. Her friends described her as someone who loved fiercely, gave generously, and someone that had a fantastic sense of humour. She was a perfectionist in her endeavours, and she always strived to give her best. It was evident that she approached life with passion and dedication. Savannah had dreams of attending the coincidentally named Savannah College of Art and Design. She even received scholarships for her talents in lacrosse and art. However, her decision not to pursue this path showed her deep-rooted commitment to her family, with her mother's health concerns leading Savannah to put her family's well-being above her own ambitions. Her presence in the lives of those around her made her a cherished daughter, sister, and friend. Jacksonville is a vibrant city in the northeastern area of Florida. It sits along the Atlantic coastline of the United States. As the largest city by land area in the US, it has a huge mix of both natural landscapes and urban attractions. On August 2nd, 2017, Savannah had begun her day like any other. She prepared to go to her shift at the Bonefish Grill. This was set to begin at 5:30 p.m. On her way to work, she spoke with one of her good friends. During the conversation, they happily talked about the next time that they would get together. Savannah had begged her friend to hang out with her over the previous days, but her friend had been sick with a cold that she jokingly said that Savannah had given to her. They continued to make future plans of spending time together, and then Savannah ended the conversation to begin her shift at the restaurant. 10 minutes later, Savannah's supervisor was expecting her to show up at any moment, ready to start work. It was a rather slow day inside the restaurant on a weekday, and she was scheduled to work after all. When Savannah never walked through the door, her supervisor grew slightly frustrated. However, they simply removed her hours from the schedule, and business continued as usual into the evening. 30 minutes after Savannah's failure to appear at work, her father received a text message coming from her phone number. The message detailed how Savannah had found a man that she had fallen in love with, and that this love was so intense that they were going to run away together. They were willing to leave both of their families and their homes behind. The message also said that Savannah would contact her parents, but only once she and her newfound love arrived at their final destination. Moments later, Savannah's brother also received a text message from his sister, one that said that she couldn't take it anymore, saying that she had to leave town. Once the initial surprise of this news wore off, Savannah's parents took a second to read over the message more carefully. After noticing multiple grammatical and spelling errors throughout the messages, Savannah's mother quickly took note of the words that were used and the structure of the message. Since they texted quite frequently throughout each day, Savannah's mother almost immediately knew that something was wrong. Whoever was sending these messages was not her daughter. Savannah's parents swiftly called her number. They were hoping that they would hear her familiar voice on the other side of the line. However, when the call was sent straight to voicemail, the anxiety they were feeling only grew. After multiple attempts to reach her, they began to think of other ways that they could make sure that Savannah was safe. Knowing that she had a shift at the Bonefish Grill, they called the number of the restaurant in order to check on her. When a supervisor who answered the phone reported that Savannah had never turned up for work, the concern in their stomachs turned into a deep-rooted fear that something was gravely wrong. They wasted no time in contacting the police. The hunt for Savannah Gold was on. Since Savannah's last known location was somewhere between her home and the restaurant where she worked, the first place investigators visited was the Bonefish Grill. They walked inside and asked employees about Savannah, asking whether they had seen her, whether they knew where she was, or if they had any information to help their investigation. Meanwhile, other officers were in the parking lot. They were scouring for any sign that she might have been there at some point. To their surprise, they quickly found Savannah's car in the back of the parking lot. The doors were unlocked, and upon further inspection, all of her important belongings were inside. This included her ID and her purse. The driver's side tire had been punctured. It sat flatly on the parking spot. This discovery led police to seriously question the validity of the messages that had been sent from Savannah's phone. They now firmly believed that Savannah had been kidnapped. With this information, officers obtained security camera footage from the restaurant. This footage provided a view of the parking lot, including Savannah's parking spot. The camera showed Savannah arriving to work in her car at 5:30 p.m. This was exactly when her shift was scheduled to begin. Savannah then got out of her car wearing her uniform. She then walked over to a silver sedan which was parked directly beside her. After talking with the occupant of the vehicle for 15 minutes through the driver's side window, Savannah walked around to the other side of the car and got into the passenger seat. As officers continued to watch the footage, they became increasingly concerned as the video showed the silver sedan beginning to shake. It showed the door opening and then forcefully being slammed back shut. Were they now witnessing Savannah's abduction? And then suddenly the vehicle was still. Investigators squinted their eyes as a driver emerged from the vehicle. They then walked over to Savannah's car and opened the driver's side door. The quality of the security video revealed no defining features. It only showed a man who was roughly 6 feet tall and had short brown hair. They continued to watch as a man reached his arm inside the car. He then took out Savannah's phone and then returned to his silver sedan. A moment later, the man walked back to Savannah's car a second time. There, he knelt down and punctured the driver's side tire. At 6:04 p.m, the mysterious man in the silver sedan is shown leaving the parking lot. And as far as they could tell, Savannah was seemingly still inside the car. This footage was immediate confirmation that Savannah had been abducted, and now time was of the essence to locate her. According to this footage, Savannah hadn't been missing for long, so their hopes of finding her alive were still high. Investigators immediately got to work. They spent the following 2 days gaining every piece of evidence that they could. Evidence obtained from Savannah's family, friends, and her co-workers. By August the 4th, the Jacksonville police already had 3 potential suspects in Savannah Gold's disappearance. The next thing to do was cross-reference the suspects that they had gathered with the description of the silver sedan from the security footage. From running the names and dates of birth through the Department of Motor Vehicles database, they discovered that their first suspect didn't even have a license. There was no record of a vehicle being registered to him. Their second suspect was found to drive a red Jeep. He too was quickly passed over as the culprit in Savannah's kidnapping. Finally, upon a search with the information of their third suspect, they found that he owned a silver Chevy Malibu. This was an exact match to the vehicle seen in the parking lot of the Bonefish Grill. Lee Rodart Jr. had been the manager and chef at the Bonefish Grill for 5 years. When police had questioned him after Savannah's disappearance, he had explained to officers that they had been working together for a long while, but he said that they were not friends outside of that work arrangement. They were strictly co-workers, and Lee claimed he hadn't seen Savannah since her last shift at the restaurant. However, upon questioning other employees at the grill, officers quickly found out that Lee and Savannah had been having an on and off, romantically charged relationship for the past 8 months. There were 3 reasons why Lee wouldn't have told officers about his relationship with Savannah. Number 1, it was against company policy to have romantic relationships with co-workers. And number 2, Lee had a girlfriend at the time. Therefore, he was hiding crucial information to the investigation. And despite these logical reasons for withholding this information, police still listed Lee as a potential suspect. This proved to be useful as his vehicle matched the one that drove away just 2 days before with Savannah inside. In addition to this, police also noticed that when they first questioned Lee, he had a few cuts and scrapes on his neck and arms. This was only technically circumstantial, but it still raised alarm bells in the investigators' minds. On August 5, 2017, Lee Rodart was arrested by officers on a warrant for driving with a suspended license. This was the opportunity investigators needed to question Lee a second time about his associations with Savannah. Police began by asking Lee to explain a second time his relationship with her. It was at this point that Lee confessed to his first lie that he told to the police. He now admitted to officers that he and Savannah had formed a romantic connection, a connection that started soon after they began working together. He said they began spending time together outside of work, but they kept this relatively secret as Lee had a girlfriend at the time. Lee continued to explain that it wasn't long before Savannah began displaying problematic behaviour that Lee didn't agree with. According to him, since he was in a relationship and they were moving so fast, he made the decision to start distancing himself from Savannah. He said he told her that they couldn't talk to each other anymore. As the questioning officer continued to question Lee, he asked a second time when the last time that he'd seen Savannah was. Lee then confessed to the second lie that he had told. He now admitted that he had talked to Savannah 3 days earlier on the day that she disappeared. According to him, he and Savannah had both arrived to work at the grill at the same time that day, and that they had even parked next to each other. When Lee had seen Savannah, he asked to talk to her for just a second. Lee detailed how the two discussed the fact that Savannah had been telling her co-workers about their previous fling. And remember, this fling was something that was against company policy, and Lee didn't want to get fired. It was at this point that Savannah got into the car, and an argument began. According to Lee's story, Savannah was angered by this confrontation. She apparently said that she was allowed to talk about whatever she wanted with her co-workers. After a period of raised voices and swearing, Lee told officers that Savannah got out of his car and walked out of the parking lot. He said there she was picked up by a green old Ford truck. Whilst Lee had chosen to be more truthful than he was the first time round, officers knew that he was still lying. After much preparation for this very moment, officers prepared to reveal the evidence that they already had. With an eerie calmness, the questioning officer revealed to Lee that they knew his story was a complete fabrication. He was lying. They explained that they had seen the security footage of Lee leaving the parking lot in his car, a car that Savannah got into but never got out of. Lee continued for a long while to deny that he took Savannah anywhere, resting on his story that she had been picked up by a green truck. However, officers would not and could not accept this story, so they continued to press Lee for the truth. They made it abundantly clear that they knew what had really happened. And eventually, after a long and grueling interrogation, Lee Rodart finally gave in to the pressure that he faced from those questioning him.
You can do this. You can do the right thing.
She was hitting me. She wouldn't stop, and I squeezed back,
Okay.
and she was just,
Was she under your arm or something, or?
she started hitting me, after I, slashed her tire,
Right.
and it went back and forth, and I squeezed her hard.
You squeezed her around her neck or around her neck with your hands?
She had
She had.
her hands around mine.
Okay.
And then you had yours around hers and y'all were just fighting back with each other.
Okay.
She just wouldn't let go, and I didn't let go.
Okay.
Stupid bitch. You do something like this.
Everything that Lee had said prior to Savannah exiting the vehicle had been true. They had gotten into an argument about Savannah telling people about their romantic ventures. However, instead of getting out of the car, Lee explained that Savannah started to physically attack him. He continued to say that he had to defend himself against Savannah's strikes. This was until he eventually had to wrap his hands around her neck. He said he squeezed until he heard a popping noise. He says he looked down and realized that he had accidentally ended Savannah's life, and that all of this was just an attempt to protect himself. Lee continued to explain that after this occurred, he left the parking lot with Savannah in the car and drove back to his house. It was here where he placed Savannah's body in his fire pit and then set it alight. He said he burned over 75% of her body before removing it. He then wrapped it in sheets and put it back in his vehicle. He then drove to a lake in the woods of a dead-end street, and there he dumped her body into the water. Lee remained firm on the notion that he had accidentally ended the life of Savannah Gold, that this was indeed just a case of self-defense. Officers confirmed Lee's story with further security footage, video which showed evidence of his car at the lake on the day of Savannah's disappearance. Officers travelled to the lake and made every attempt possible to gather more evidence, and hopefully to recover Savannah's body. With the assistance of a dive team, Savannah's body was recovered from the water. An autopsy was promptly performed. However, this autopsy would prove essentially nothing. The burns to her body had concealed her cause of death. The only thing they did know was that Savannah had suffered a violent homicide at the hands of Lee Rodart. When Lee was charged with second-degree homicide, he pled not guilty due to the fact that he was acting in self-defense. He was subsequently remanded without bail until his trial. It took 2 years for Lee's case to go to trial in August of 2019. It took this long because multiple delays and postponements had taken place. When his court date finally arrived, Lee filed the Stand Your Ground petition, a law in Florida that protects those against prosecution if they were in fear for their life when they committed homicide or other severe bodily injuries. While this law in Florida more closely pertains to people who are the victims of home invasions, Lee's legal team still attempted to make it stick in this case. While the judge denied the petition and faced appeals, the trial continued to be put on hold. This meant that Savannah's family went for years without any relief from the pain that they were suffering. By February 2021, Lee and his legal team had finally realised that their appeals were getting them nowhere. Therefore, Lee changed his plea from not guilty by reason of self-defence to guilty of second-degree homicide. As part of Lee's plea deal, he would avoid the life sentence that he could have received if his case went to trial, and he would then instead receive 40 years in prison. From the years of delays in his case, the judge awarded Lee credit for the time he had served so far. This left 37 years to serve in prison, meaning that Lee could be released in 2058. Following the sentencing, Savannah's family spoke about the evil that Lee Rodart had committed against their daughter and sister. With Lee's back turned, he wiped away tears as Savannah's family remembered the positive light that she was in their lives, stating how Lee had taken it away so mercilessly. Savannah's father spoke about the immense, endless love that he had for his daughter, stating that the only way they could continue to go on without her is through knowing that she wouldn't want her passing to ruin their lives. And as for Savannah's mother, she struggled as her cancer had returned twice over the course of Lee's arrest, spanning over his conviction and the rest of the legal proceedings. Because of this pain and suffering on an extreme level, the judge ordered Savannah's mother to be awarded $9,000 in restitution, and then an additional $12,000 to be awarded to a victim trust fund. Following the hearing, Savannah's brother reflected on his experience throughout the past 3 years. He stated that he was grateful to the professionals who so swiftly investigated and then gained justice for his sister. In addition to the restitution and the victim trust fund, the public raised an additional $6,000 in order to help the Gold family pay for Savannah's funeral expenses. This was done through a GoFundMe campaign. The Gold family will always remember Savannah as a kind-spirited, giving and artistic soul, someone who radiated kindness to everyone around her. Do you think the punishment fits the crime here? What do you think could be done to avoid something like this happening again in the future? Please do let me know down in the comments. And please do remember to hit like if you appreciate what I'm doing here. Be careful out there, and I'll see you soon.